Numbers of a Boy Soldier by Brock Johnson. A little bit about Sierra Leone. It's located in southwestern Africa. Climate is typically tropical, hot all year round, dry in the winters, and then rainy in the summers. Terrain is jungle, woody hill country, swamps, and then they have a few mountain ranges. Population is 5,879,098 people. Infant mortality is fairly high, about 72 deaths per 1,000 live births. Life expectancy is also fairly low at 45 years of age. Government is constitutional democracy, and income rate per capita is $2,100, based out of 2014. Population below the poverty line is 70%, and then their major resources is diamonds. So this is a map of Ismay Bey's journey, the boy in my book. He starts here in his home village. He basically goes on a journey to his friend's house in Machujang. While he's there, his home village gets attacked. So he hears this, so he continues on to Kamator, and that's where he's actually present when the second rebels attack. So basically, he continues on his journey and ends up in Freetown. I couldn't find very many international reviews, but I found one from The Guardian of the UK. It says a furious and desolate account of how ordinary children were turned into professional killers.
Failure.
So member overview, basically, the fighting started in March 1991 when the RUF, or the Revolutionary United Front, came in and started to attack Sierra Leone. They were ran under Foday Sankoh. Their goal was to basically make it to Freetown, and where the government is, and override the APC government. The rebels kept driving, and their goal, like I said, was to get to Freetown. Meanwhile, during all this, the author of A Long Way Gone, Ismay Bey, was caught in the middle of this mess. So after being separated from his family, his goal every day is to stay alive. So throughout a rough year, he just keeps traveling with friends or just other people along the way, trying to avoid rebels. Eventually, he makes it to a safe village in Ely. Ely is a village where the government has a military post, and eventually Ely runs out of military officers, so they recruit the kids. So eventually they're recruited, trained, and put on the front lines to kill rebel troops. The government military has turned these young boys into mass murderers by getting them addicted to meth and cocaine. These boys think that they're invincible, so they just, he fought for about 3 years until they were rescued by the United Nations Children Emergency Fund, and this organization took them to Freetown to a rehabilitation center. So here's a historical timeline of what happened in their civil war. So it started in 1991 under Foday Sankoh and the RUF. They began pushing their way towards Freetown. After this, a bunch of them just their goal was to make it to Freetown, capture the government. They said they thought it was corrupt. 1996, the president was Kaba. and he signs a peace accord with the rebels. But in 1997, the peace accord unravels, and the RUF pushes into Freetown and pushes President Kaba and the government into exile, so the RUF takes over. The AFRK, the Armed Forces Revolutionary Council, they are out of Western Africa. They come in and help push the RUF away and put Kaba and the government back into ruling. In 1997, the UN Security Council imposes sanctions on Sierra Leone, so they're helping them out, trying to get them back on their feet. In 1998, of February, the AFRK pushes the rebels finally out again. Rebels backing Revolutionary United Front leader Wande Sonko seizes parts of Freetown from Ikmog. After weeks of bitter fighting, they are driven out and leaving behind 5,000 dead. Continued, 1999 of May, ceasefire in Freetown, and the hopes that an 8-year civil war is soon to be over. Continued, UN troops arrive, so the British come in 1999, try to stop fighting once again. Rebels in 2000 of May, rebels close in on Freetown. 800 British patrols sent to Freetown to evacuate British citizens and to help secure the airport there. 11 in 2000, August, 11 British soldiers were taken hostage by the militia there. Fighting continues, and finally the UN troops end the war. Alright, outside involvement, the UN. Starting in 1995, as rebel forces were pushing towards Freetown to overrule the government, the UN tried to intervene and put the country back in the government's hands. The UN proposed many peace agreements with the RUF, but the RUF didn't approve of them. In November 1996, President Kaba was elected. Soon after, the RUF forces were pressuring Freetown again and pushing Kaba and the government into exile. With the help of the Economic Community of West African States Monitoring Group, ECMOG, they were also an army, pushed back the rebels, and in 1998, President Kaba was back in office. In July 1999, the Lone Peace Accord was signed, and the rebels, saying that the rebels could have seats in their government if if there wasn't any more fighting. This is when the United Nations mission in Syria took place to overlook the peace signing and make sure the rebels kept their promises. But in May 2000, the rebels violated the treaty and fighting continues. In the same month, British troops are brought in and forces the rebels to sign another peace agreement. By the end of May, the peace agreement is signed and the civil war is declared over. UN continues in the summer of 2000, and the UN is brought in to kind of overlook specific courts for the war crimes and other related crimes in Sierra Leone. In 2005, the UN actually lands a peacekeeping office in Sierra Leone, overwatching the courts and treaties. U.S. involvement, there wasn't many under the Bush administration. The U.S. never set military boots in the country. Instead, they tried to negotiate with the rebels, which they failed. The U.S. supported amnesty in Sierra Leone. The Clinton administration thought that this was the best way to deal with the rebels. He just didn't didn't think it was any of their business being in Sierra Leone, so they never entered. My opinion on the involvement, I think the United Nations did all they could fighting off the rebels. Maybe they could have entered Sierra Leone a little earlier to prevent so many deaths, but they made peace agreements with the RUF. They sent British soldiers into Sierra Leone, Freetown, to fight the rebels. They established the United Nations Children Emergency Fund to rehabilitate kids who fought in the war. So basically making them all better, making their lives better. On the other hand, the U.S. did not help Sierra Leone during the time of atrocities. I believe they could have put military boots on the ground. Usually I believe that the U.S. should stay out of other countries' business, but after reading this book, my opinion has changed. With the mess that this country was in, the U.S. could have stepped in to help during the 8 years of the killing in Sierra Leone. An amnesty is an official pardon for people who have been convicted of political offenses. So this is what the Bush administration did to the rebels in Sierra Leone. They basically forgave them, and that's it.